I still can't tell you what actually happened in that elevator. I can only tell you what I remember, what my friend Mira remembers, and the fact that those two memories don't match. Honestly, that's the part that scares me most. This happened on a Saturday night last October. Mira and I had grabbed a couple of drinks near her apartment and called it an early night. Nothing wild. We were back at her building a little after 1 in the morning. She lived on the 14th floor of one of those newer, luxury high-rises glass lobby, security cameras everywhere, key fob access for every elevator. It was the kind of building that made you feel safe the moment you walked inside. We'd ridden those elevators dozens of times. Nothing about that night felt unusual. We stepped into elevator 2 at exactly 1:15. Mira tapped her key fob against the reader and pressed 14. The doors closed. The elevator climbed for maybe 10 seconds. Then, it stopped. Not with a jolt, not like the brakes caught. It simply stopped so smoothly it almost felt intentional. The lights went out a second later. Not flickering, not dimming. Complete darkness, the kind where your own hand disappears inches from your face. Mira grabbed my arm. "Okay, this is great," I said, and it came out way less funny than it did in my head. Neither of us laughed. I found the emergency panel by feel and pressed the alarm. A weak electronic beep answered me. Then silence. No operator, no intercom, nothing. I pressed it again. Same lonely beep. That was somehow worse than hearing nothing at all. Mira pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. For a few seconds it helped. Then, the battery started dropping fast. It died completely in under 10 seconds. She stared at the black screen. It was charged. She tried turning it back on. Nothing. We stood there, in complete darkness again. At first, we kept talking, mostly because silence felt dangerous. We complained about the building, wondered how long it would take maintenance to notice. She said something about how she was definitely emailing the property manager, and I said something back, I don't even remember what, just noise to fill the dark. Then, the elevator dropped. Only a few inches. But it was enough to send that horrible weightless feeling through my stomach. It stopped with a heavy thud. Neither of us spoke after that. About a minute later, it moved again. This time upward. Or at least, I think it was upward. Without being able to see, direction became strangely difficult to judge. Another stop. Another few inches. Another stop. It felt less like an elevator, traveling between floors, and more like something trying to remember how elevators were supposed to move. I don't know how long that continued. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 20. Time had already started slipping away from me. Then I heard it. Breathing. At first I assumed it was Mira. Then I realized her breathing was quick and uneven. Mine wasn't much better. This was different. Slow, steady, patient. It came from my left. The problem was, my left side was against the wall. There shouldn't have been anyone there. I know what fear does to a person sitting in total darkness. I know your ears start inventing things to fill silence that's too complete, that your own pulse can sound like someone else's breath if you're scared enough. I've told myself that plenty of times since. It didn't feel that way in the moment. I closed my eyes instinctively before realizing that made no difference. I listened. 3 breaths. A pause. 3 more. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched whoever or whatever was making them. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. Fear has a strange way of convincing you that staying silent is somehow safer. After what felt like forever, Mira whispered, "Did you hear that?" Every muscle in my body tightened. Hear what? It wasn't even really a question, more like my mouth needed something to do. She didn't answer right away. Nothing. Forget it. The breathing stopped. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe I just couldn't hear it over my own heartbeat anymore. A few minutes later, the elevator lurched again. Harder this time. Something above us groaned. Metal scraping against metal. Then, with no warning at all, the lights came back. Both of us blinked against the sudden brightness, and it took a second before either of us noticed we were standing in opposite corners of the elevator. Not where we'd been. Neither of us remembered moving. Mira looked at me like she was about to ask if I'd pushed her at some point. I hadn't. I would have remembered that much, at least. The floor display above the buttons glowed. It read 9. Neither of us spoke. We had started on the lobby. We'd pressed 14. Somehow, we were on the 9th floor. The elevator doors slid open without a sound. A brightly lit hallway stretched out in front of us. Everything looked perfectly normal. Gray carpet, white walls, apartment doors evenly spaced down both sides. The only thing that wasn't normal was the number mounted beside the elevator. 9. Neither of us moved. I looked back at the control panel. The button for 14 was still lit. It had been the entire time. A man's voice finally broke the silence. "You two coming out, or what?" A security guard stood in the hallway holding a ring of keys. He wasn't out of breath. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked bored, like this was somewhere near the bottom of his list of problems that night. We stepped out. The moment my shoes touched the hallway carpet, I felt strangely light, like a pressure I'd never even noticed had just let go of me. What happened?" I asked, and my voice came out shakier than I wanted it to. Elevator stopped. For half an hour. He glanced at me, already halfway to not caring. "Nah, couple minutes, tops." I looked at Mira. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, it didn't feel that long to me either." "What are you? We were in there forever." She frowned, and it wasn't performative. She genuinely looked confused. "I don't think so." The guard didn't let either of us finish. "Just take the stairs tonight." That was it. No apology, no explanation. He clipped his radio back onto his belt and started walking us toward the stairwell like the conversation was already over. I glanced back once. The elevator doors were closing. Just before they met, I could have sworn I heard someone take one slow breath inside. I didn't say anything about that part. Not that night. The lobby clock read 1:46 a.m. I stopped walking. We got in at 1:15. Mira glanced at the clock, unbothered. So that's 30 minutes. We were in there 30 minutes. She actually laughed. "No way, that was like 5. "I'm serious, Mira." She pulled out her phone to prove me wrong. It powered back on, no explanation, no low battery warning, just on sitting at 19%. Not the 34 it had shown before it died. Not 0 either, just less. She didn't seem bothered by it. I didn't say anything. She unlocked it. The last message she'd sent her boyfriend was time-stamped 1:14 a.m. The next one, "Elevator finally opened. LOL. This building is a joke," was sent at 1:46 a.m. Her smile dropped. "Okay, that's weird. You just told me it felt like 5 minutes." It did. We took the stairs up to her apartment. Neither of us said much. I think we were both doing the math in our heads and not liking where it landed. A few days later, I asked, carefully, if she remembered hearing anything while we were stuck. I didn't bring up the breathing myself. I didn't want to put it in her head if it wasn't already there. She thought about it a while before she said, "Honestly, I kept thinking there was someone else in there with us. I just couldn't tell where they'd be standing." That was close enough to what I'd heard that I didn't need to say anything else. 2 months later, Mira moved out, told her landlord it was the rent increase. The real reason came out one night over drinks, months after. She said she just couldn't make herself get in elevator 2 anymore. Said she'd ridden it alone 3 times after that night, and every single time, she heard that same slow breathing right behind her, and every time she turned around, there was nobody there. I wish that were the end of it. It isn't. About 6 months later, I ran into a guy who still lived in that building. Got to talking, mentioned offhand that we'd once gotten stuck in one of the elevators. He asked, "Elevator 2? I said, "Yeah." He kind of sighed. "My wife won't touch that one anymore." "Why not?" He shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal, like he'd said this exact sentence to other people before. She says sometimes the doors open, and before anyone even steps in, she can already hear someone breathing inside. I still take elevators. I have to. But every ride, I count in my head. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, just to prove to myself the ride is taking as long as it's supposed to. So far it always has. I just hope the day never comes where the doors open and it feels like 5 minutes went by and the clock says 30. I need to tell you about the night I walked back into a bar that had already closed. The bartender insists I came back. My friend insists I never went inside. Somehow, they're both telling the truth. This happened last November in Milwaukee. My friend Eric and I had gone to O'Connell's after work, the same neighborhood bar we'd been visiting for years. It wasn't anything fancy. Brick walls, faded beer signs, an old pool table that leaned just enough to ruin every straight shot, and a bartender named Mike who already knew what you'd order before you sat down. We got there a little after 9. Nothing unusual happened. A couple beers, a game of darts. Neither of us played well. Eric trying, unsuccessfully, to flirt with one of the waitresses. Around midnight, Mike rang the old brass bell behind the bar. Last call. We paid our tab, wished Mike a good night, and stepped outside. It was cold enough that our breath hung in the air. Eric was trying to convince me we still had time to grab pizza before everything closed when I reached into my jacket. No wallet. I checked every pocket twice. Nothing. I left it on the bar. Eric shrugged. I'll wait here. The whole walk back couldn't have taken more than 40 seconds. I grabbed the front door. It opened. The first thing I noticed wasn't that anything looked wrong. It was that everything looked exactly the same. The same song was still playing over the speakers. The same people were sitting where we'd left them. Mike was still behind the bar polishing a pint glass. For a second I wondered if we'd never actually left. I laughed to myself. Maybe Mike hadn't locked up yet. Maybe we'd only been outside for 20 seconds instead of 40. I walked toward the counter. Sorry, Mike. Left my wallet. No answer. He kept polishing the same glass. Back and forth. Back and forth. I figured he hadn't heard me over the music. My wallet was still sitting beside the register. Exactly where I'd left it. I reached over the counter and picked it up. That's when I noticed something. The man sitting closest to me hadn't moved. Not once. His beer was halfway to his mouth. His elbow hadn't shifted. His eyes hadn't blinked. I looked farther down the bar. Nobody was moving, not talking, not drinking, not even looking around. Every person was frozen exactly where they'd been. The music was still playing. It suddenly sounded wrong. Not distorted, just slower, like every note was being stretched just a little too long. I looked back at Mike. He was still wiping the glass. Back, forth, back, forth. Except the towel wasn't moving anymore. His hand was. The towel stayed perfectly still against the glass, while his arm repeated the same motion over and over, like someone acting out the idea of polishing a glass without understanding how polishing worked. A chill ran through me. Mike? Nothing. Then, the music stopped. Instantly. No fade. No click. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Mike stopped moving. So did everyone else. For one long second, nothing happened. Then every head in the room turned toward me. Slowly, perfectly together. Every face stopped on mine at exactly the same moment. Nobody blinked. Nobody spoke. They only watched. I wish I could tell you their faces looked angry, or blank, or threatening. They didn't. They looked curious, like they were trying to remember who I was. Then Mike smiled. Not a normal smile. His lips curled upward, but nothing else on his face changed. His eyes didn't move. His cheeks didn't lift. Just the smile. I ran. I didn't look back. I shoved through the front door so hard it slammed against the brick wall outside. Eric grabbed my shoulder. Dude, I could barely breathe. What happened? I turned around. The building was dark. Every light inside was off. The closed sign hung in the window. The front door was locked. I stared at it. I was just inside. Eric frowned. No? I watched you. You walked up to the door and just stood there. I laughed. I actually laughed because it was the only thing my brain knew how to do. What are you talking about? You never opened it. You stood there looking through the glass for 6 or 7 minutes. I remember looking at my watch. 12:23. We'd walked outside at 12:15. I couldn't explain where the time had gone. The next Friday I went back. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to know. Mike was working. I asked if I'd left my wallet there the week before. He nodded. You came back for it. You remember that? Sure. You said thanks. I felt my stomach drop. Mike. My friend says I never came back inside. He frowned. What? He said I stood outside the whole time. Mike looked genuinely confused. Then he said something I'll probably think about for the rest of my life. I remember talking to you. He paused. I just don't remember seeing you come through the door. Neither of us spoke after that. I still pass O'Connell's every few weeks. Sometimes, if it's late enough, I slow down just long enough to look through the front window. Most nights, it's empty. But once, just once, I saw Mike behind the bar, polishing the same glass. Back and forth, back and forth. The place had closed 3 hours earlier. I still don't know if the man in that parking garage was planning to rob me, or if he just wanted to know how far he could follow me before I noticed. Either possibility bothers me. This happened last November in Minneapolis. A few coworkers and I went out after work to celebrate someone getting promoted. Nothing fancy, just drinks at a sports bar downtown. We left a little after midnight. I'd parked in the attached garage because it was freezing outside, and paying $20 for parking seemed better than scraping ice off my windshield the next morning. My car was on level 4. I remember repeating it to myself before we went inside. Level 4. When I stepped out of the elevator after midnight, the garage was almost empty. Concrete, fluorescent lights, long rows of parked cars. That strange echo every parking garage seems to have, where your own footsteps sound like someone else's. I started walking toward where I thought I'd parked. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps behind me. Not close, maybe 30 feet back. I glanced over my shoulder. A man had just come through the stairwell door. Late 50s, dark jacket, baseball cap. Nothing unusual. He looked down the aisle for a second, then started walking the same direction I was. I didn't think much of it. People leave garages at the same time all the time. I kept walking. So did he. I reached the spot where I thought my car was. Same make, same color. I grabbed the driver's handle. Locked. I looked at the license plate. Wrong car. Mine was one aisle over. I laughed quietly at myself and turned back. The man had stopped walking. Not because he'd reached a car. He was simply standing there, looking at me. The second our eyes met, he started walking again. Slowly. I suddenly became aware that we were the only two people I could see on the entire floor. I told myself I was overthinking it. Parking garages make everybody nervous. I found my actual car in the next aisle. Hit the unlock button. The headlights flashed. As I opened the driver's door, I looked back one last time. The man had stopped again. Still watching. I got in, locked the doors, started the engine. By the time I pulled out of the space, he was gone. I didn't see where he'd gone. I figured he'd reached his own car. I drove home. The whole thing was already starting to feel silly. The next morning I got to work and realized my company laptop was missing. I checked my office. Nothing. Called home. Nothing. Then I remembered. I'd taken it out of my backpack before leaving work so a coworker could borrow a charger. I'd carried it separately all evening. IT helped me track the laptop using the company's management software. The last recorded location was the parking garage, level 4. I drove back during lunch. In daylight, the place looked completely ordinary. People coming and going, cars everywhere. I retraced the path I'd taken the night before. About halfway down the first aisle, my laptop bag was sitting against a concrete pillar, exactly where I'd stopped after grabbing the wrong car door. Untouched. I picked it up. A security officer walking the garage noticed me. That yours? Yeah, you're lucky. I know. He nodded. cleaning crew found it this morning. I thanked him. As I started walking away, he asked, "Were you alone last night?" I stopped. "Why?" He pointed toward the security office. "We reviewed the cameras after someone reported the bag." "What about them?" He hesitated. "There was a guy behind you." I noticed him. The officer nodded. He stayed about 30 feet back the whole time. A chill ran through me. I figured he was going to his car. The officer shook his head. "No, he followed every turn you made. He stopped every time you stopped." Neither of us said anything for a second. Finally, I asked, "So, what happened after I drove away?" He looked toward the monitor inside the office. "He walked over to where your car had been parked." My stomach tightened. "And?" He stood there for almost 4 minutes. "Doing what?" "Nothing. Just standing exactly where your driver's door had been." I felt my mouth go dry. "What happened after that?" He turned around, went back into the stairwell, and left? The officer frowned. "That's the strange part. We checked every camera. The stairwell has cameras on every exit." "I know. He never came out." I waited for him to smile, to tell me another camera had missed him, that he'd slipped out a service entrance. Something. Instead, he just shrugged. "Probably found some employee access we don't know about." Maybe he did. That's the explanation I've tried to stick with. But every time I park in a garage now, I don't look for my car first. I look for the stairwell, and if I hear footsteps behind me, I stop walking. Because sometimes I wonder if the only reason that man never reached me was because I accidentally stopped at the wrong car first. If you enjoy slow burn realistic horror stories, hit subscribe and join me for the next one. New disturbing stories every week. Until then, stay safe out there.